Hello everyone, and welcome to this video on RNAV approaches in the Cherokee 180. Today we're going to look at how intuitive it is to configure the GTN 750 for an RNAV approach, and then how easy it is to actually follow that approach all the way through to the threshold. We're flying the Cherokee 180 just off the coast of Coffs Harbour. This is in eastern Australia, just about an hour and a half's flight north of Sydney. So here we have our Coffs Harbour RNAV chart for runway 21. Here we see the map, and in the bottom left hand corner of the map we have the 25 nautical mile minimum safe altitude dial. This dial basically shows you what the minimum safe altitude is if you're approaching the airfield from all the different angles. So you can see from the landward side, 5,500 feet is the minimum safe altitude you should be at. As you can see on the map there, off on the left hand side there is terrain elevation, and then if you approach from the south you should be at least 3,300 feet high, and then from the sea of course there's not as much there's basically no obstruction, so that's 2,500 feet. And also across to the right hand side you can see a little diagram that shows that you should not be circling over the land since the terrain is variable. And scaling down you can see the missed approach box. This box also shows the exact altitudes you should be at the different points of the RNAV approach. So basically the RNAV approach, it gives you the right tracks into the runway, but it does not work out the vertical points for you. It only does LNAV, not VNAV. And so you have to work out what your altitude should be at different points. And if we go up to the map, we can see that the transition point that we're going to be using is CFSND. This one is 5 nautical miles to the east of the beginning of the approach, which is CFSNI. And this is the point we're going to be flying out to and then transitioning into the RNAV approach. So at CFSND, we should be 5,500 feet. At CFSNI, we should be 3,970. At November Foxtrot, we should be 2,060, and then at November Mike, we should be at our minimums, ready to either go around or ready to land. Our missed approach procedures is turn left, track direct to CFSNH, thence 090, climb to 2,500 feet. And you can see on the map there the left-hand turn that you would take on track to CFSNH, and then from there 090 to 2,500 feet. So that's our basic approach, and that's how the RNAV chart reads for Coffs Harbour runway 21. Let's begin the flight by going to the approach button in the menu page on the 750, and we're going to select the RNAV approach. You can see right here where we are. We're going to select the RNAV approach of runway 21, and if we go to the map we can scroll up and see where our position is. We're going to select our transition as the transition that we talked about on our chart. We're going to load this approach. And now when we go back to the map we can see that that approach is overlaid on our screen. Now let's just check that we are in nav mode with our autopilot, and let's flick our autopilot now over to high track mode in the nav mode, and that means that it's going to start following our GPS track. As you can see, the plane is very gradually banking to the right hand side, but this isn't exactly as accurate as we'd like it to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our heading bug. We're going to flick that around to the course that we need to set. That turn is not as sharp as we'd like it to be, so let's take the autopilot and set it back to heading hold. This is going to give us a rate 1 right-hand turn, which is faster and sharper than the nav mode would give us. But once we come to our set heading, we're going to want to re-engage nav mode to hold that track. You can see that we are now flying inbound to CFSND, and that is our transition point, which is the beginning of the RNAV approach. And at this point we want to be 5,500 feet. We are currently 7,000, so let's begin descending. And we can see Coffs Harbour off in the distance to our left hand side. Coffs Harbour is a very, very beautiful scenery by Orbex, and I definitely recommend the Orbex large land class scenery they've done for Australia, as well as some of the smaller Orbex airfields that they've done. It just makes it a very fantastic region for VFR and IFR flight in small aircraft up and down the coast of eastern Australia. You can see in the Cherokee here we're using the level change or the altitude hold switch to disengage from our current level of 7,000, and we're going to very carefully use our trim wheel to control our rate of descent. You can actually control the rate of descent and the rate of climb quite stably and quite accurately if you get the right trim settings and power settings. Coffs Harbour is by no means restricted to only small aircraft. I believe Qantas as well as Virgin Australia both operate 737s, and there are a few Airbus A320s that come in and out of that runway as well. Now that we've finished leveling out at 5,500 feet, let's bring our power back forwards and just retrim the aircraft for stable flight while re-engaging our level hold. As we come close to our first left-hand turn, let's just set our heading bug. And we're going to use the same technique that we used earlier on, where we're actually going to take a left-hand rate 1 turn using our heading hold rather than keeping the autopilot set to nav. When keeping the autopilot set to nav, what the autopilot is going to do is bring us around to the left, but it won't actually keep us tracking our track as tightly as we would like it to. And as soon as we finish our left-hand turn, and now we're inbound to CFSNI, let's begin our further descent down to 3,970 feet. You can see that as we reach our next waypoint, we also reach the altitude that we should be at that waypoint. So that's how we know we're right on track. Next, let's take another left-handed turn to 209. This is our runway heading. This is going to be the track that's going to take us all the way down to the runway threshold. At this point, let's think about doing a final approach checklist. Here we're going to just check which tank is feeding the engine. We want the tank that has the most fuel in it to be the one that's feeding the engine, so that we don't unbalance our tanks too greatly. During the cruise and pretty much all stages of flight, you're only ever able to feed the engine with one tank at one time, and so that is why every now and then it's a good idea in the Cherokee to check to make sure that your fuel imbalance is not getting too great. Also, we're going to push the mixture in and make that full for landing, and just check that our seat belts are all in good order. Also, we have to make sure that our fuel pump is on. At this point now, you can see the coast off to our right hand side, and at this point we're just making sure that the aircraft is stable on approach. One thing I think is really beautiful about Coffs Harbour is this particular approach when you come down over the harbour and the town, and you can see all of the beautiful little ships and buildings and things going on. Also, you can see that there's a slightly raised outcrop of trees and a kind of embankment just next to the harbour, and that makes for an interesting approach. You can see on our NAV1 indicator the glide slope needle and the localizer needle are actually working quite well for us on this RNAV approach. The glide slope needle is actually indicating whether we're above or below our current descent track. And as you can see, the glide slope needle is showing that we're pretty much right where we should be. And that is also cross-confirmed by our charts. And now that you can see we're coming lower and lower, we're going to start paying attention to our speed. We're going to start slowing down and making sure that by the time we have wheels coming down, our speed is correct. Also, we're going to just add a notch of flaps in. And like we said before, this runway is generally used by 737s as well as small aircraft, so there's plenty of room. We can afford to hold off the runway for as long as we like to make sure that we get a very nice smooth touchdown.